From the Gospel according to St. Mark, chapter 6, I'll be reading verses 1 through 13 from the Common English Bible today. Jesus left that place and came to his hometown. His disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue. Many who heard him were surprised. Where did this man get all this? What's this wisdom he's been given? What about the powerful acts accomplished through him? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't he Mary's son and the brother of James, Joses, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? They were repulsed by him and fell into sin. Jesus said to them, "Prophets are honored everywhere except their own hometowns, among their relatives, and in their own households." He was unable to do any miracles there except he placed his hands on a few sick people and healed them. He was appalled by their disbelief. Then Jesus traveled through the surrounding villages teaching. He called for the 12 and sent them out in pairs. He gave them authority over unclean spirits. He instructed them to take nothing for their journey except a walking stick, no bread, no bags, and no money in their belts. He told them to wear sandals, but not to put on 2 shirts. He said, "Whatever house you enter, remain there until you leave that place. If a place doesn't welcome you or listen to you, as you leave, shake the dust off your feet as a witness against them." So, they went out and proclaimed that people should change their hearts and lives. They cast out many demons, and they anointed many sick people with olive oil and healed them. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. I gotta move this just a touch without dropping anything. Wonder if these words sound familiar to any of you. Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to go where everybody knows your name. It's a song, huh? You recognize it? How many people recognize it? The ones who really recognized it didn't just raise their hands. They went like that. They knew which show it came from. Now, I hope and pray that no one is too terribly offended by the fact that the words to this theme song from a comedy show called Cheers. I hope you're not offended by that, because there is a lot of truth in the words that goes hand in hand with our passage from today, and that goes hand in hand with this whole idea of community as a mark of discipleship, especially as a mark of your discipleship, or my discipleship, if you prefer to say it that way. Sometimes we do want to be someplace where people are always glad you came, where troubles are all the same, and at least where some people know your name. I know the great thing about that song, they never played all the verses on the TV, but some of the other verses are absolutely hilarious to that song. You wake up in the morning, the coffee pot is broke. You go to work and your boss has got your goat. It goes on and on like that. Everybody wants to get away from something. They want some place of peace because our days don't always go the way we planned them. And you know, it's kind of sad to me that this whole idea was somehow captured on a television show about a bar, when really it should be a song about the church. It really should be. See, a couple interesting things to note about this passage we just read from Mark's gospel. Jesus wasn't welcome in the place where he was known best before he started his ministry. Jesus was not welcome, and their lack of hospitality for him was expressed through these many questions they had about him. Now, when we hear those questions, we think, okay, the people are just too familiar with Jesus. They saw him grow up. They knew him. They knew his family. And they just weren't giving Jesus a break or a chance. But those questions, if you look at them closely, are really questions about belonging. They're questions about drawing lines, about making borders, about deciding who is in and who is out. By remembering how much about them they know from a place, and how much that person remembers about themselves and that place from whence they came. You see, their questions weren't about them forgetting Jesus, but somehow in what Jesus was teaching and doing, they were afraid that Jesus had forgotten them. They were scared that Jesus had gone off and left them. They were scared that Jesus was going someplace they didn't want to go. They were scared that Jesus might just be making something new that they would have to be a part of themselves. You know, many of the divisions in the community of faith today are over those very same things. Questions about belonging. Questions about who's in, who's out. Questions about where we draw lines based on our tradition. Very, very much like the questions that were asked of Jesus in his hometown then. And Jesus said about the people who were arguing over him then that they fell into sin. That's interesting, isn't it? And people who were arguing over Jesus and his place were committing sin. I wonder if Jesus might say the same thing today. It's one of the greatest sins facing the Christians of today, the incredible need we feel to question how Jesus is acting in the life of those around us. You know, come to think of it, maybe me even bringing up the question is sin. But I do know that this. Jesus doesn't stop there. Jesus doesn't stop with having these people being, falling into sin and him being perplexed by them all. The rejection he felt through those questions, the sin that the people fell into over them, had Jesus begin to form a new community, a new home for himself. Jesus began sending the disciples out, we're told. Sent them out 2 by 2. He gave them jobs to do. He told them certain things to take and not to take. He told them, what they were to do when they were go into a city and what they were to do when they left. Now, some people look at these things and they say, okay, this is a blueprint for how we're supposed to do the church today. We should, send ourselves out 2 by 2, not take any money with us. And if people turn their back on us, we should, take our shoes off and shake the... None of that stuff makes sense in our culture. In their culture, it made a lot of sense. But what Jesus was doing here was saying, okay, you've got questions? I'll just form a new community here. And that's exactly where we come in. Because we're part of that community. You ever heard the phrase that blood is thicker than water? You heard that phrase? Have you? Yeah, okay. Well, in Christianity, to ask the question, isn't blood thicker than water, makes absolutely no sense at all. It really doesn't. The water of baptism, our initiation into the family of God, this water creates a community that is stronger and closer and paid for with a higher price than any family bond. So to make a phrase like blood is thicker than water in the church is almost blasphemy. Because nothing is thicker than the water that holds us together as a community. Folks, the current statistics on our attendance here at First United Methodist Church are kind of interesting. Okay? In the last quarter, the last 3 months, over 220 different individuals worshiped here at least one time in that 3 months, okay? And yet our average attendance weekly attendance stands somewhere around 145. All right? Over 220 were here at least once, but our average attendance is only about 145. Do the math there. There's a huge difference, right? Huge difference. If you work the exact math out, it was 68% of the people were here that could have been here. And I don't know, but the last time I checked, 68%, even on a bell curve, is a failing grade. How do we build community like that? How do we get to know one another? How do we show the rest of the world what's important when there's failure to even be? Now, I know, folks, in some ways today I'm preaching to the choir. Okay? You're here. Thank you. Appreciate it. I get that. All right? I get that I'm preaching to the choir. 68% is pretty low. The greatest shared experience Christians have is the spiritual formation we get in worship. And if we aren't here, if we aren't participating in that, then the community Jesus wishes to form and send out will fall apart when questions start coming up. A parishioner walked up to his pastor and said to her one time, "Pastor, where has so-and-so been? I haven't seen them in worship in ages." Well, the pastor kind of looked around and then kind of looked down at her feet and said to the parishioner, "Well, I'm not sure. When was the last time you called your brother and checked on them?" Community building starts right here, with us realizing that when someone's missing from the place where everybody knows your name, everybody starts checking. But you know, community building doesn't stop here, because it didn't stop in the gathering there with Jesus. Jesus sent community building stuff out into the world, sending disciples out 2 by 2, showing that community, being a part of community, meant also being in the world. Crazy Paul was an interesting character that was in the town I grew up in Mount Hope. I don't know if I've told you about Crazy Paul before or not, but Crazy Paul carried a snow shovel 365 days a year as he walked through Mount Hope, usually in a heavy jacket and snow boots, okay, regardless of the weather. Now, most of the time on this snow shovel that he carried, there was a sign that said something about the love of God or the return of Christ or something religious. And everybody just referred to him as Crazy Paul in town, because they thought he was just a little bit strange with his get-up and the way he shared his message. My dad never called him Crazy Paul. I guess as a kid, one of the things that happens to you is you kind of grow up in the sins of your friends, and you learn the nicknames that you probably shouldn't. My dad always greeted Paul at the Mount Hope United Methodist Church when he came in and took off his coat and sat down his shovel. And sometimes he even walked into the sanctuary talking to Paul. And I heard him one time say to Paul, "Thanks for reminding me all the time that I need to live my faith in everything I do too. I may not carry a sign, Paul, but I want my life to look like it, like I did." The sending out of the disciples is not some formula we're supposed to use to evangelize. This story about that is a reminder to us that wherever we go, whatever we touch in this world, is a way of showing the glory of God to the world around us. Our homes are that way, or should be. Our work is that way, or could be. Our play, our recreation is that way. Or it can be. If we just take it out there, then we take what we have here and share it, however and whenever we go. So, I'll say the good news to you again today. Making your way in the world today takes everything you got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. They're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles. They're all the same. You're here today because you want to be where everybody knows your name. Jesus gives us the power to build that kind of community here and out there, my friends. We just have to decide. What's thicker? Blood that runs through veins and families? Or water that was paid for by the blood of the Son of God? Which is thicker? Making your way in the world today takes everything you got. I thank God I've got here to be. Amen?